So two things are gonna happen in this video. Number one, I'm gonna tell you a secret that you cannot tell anyone outside of this video. And then number two, I'm gonna share with you a massive T206 card that I recently picked up because it enabled me to cross over an incredible milestone in my journey to complete the 520 card T206 set. But first, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chris, otherwise known on X and Instagram as @CRT_Sportscards. And this video is gonna be right in line with our other content recently around the very first printing of the T206 set. So if you're new around here, hit that subscribe button so you can further your knowledge around the T206 set. But if you're a returning viewer, welcome back and thank you for tuning in to another video in this series. But let's get to it. What is the secret that you and I are going to share going forward? So I have to admit, I have, if you were following me on Instagram, I have more than 291 T206 cards. I have been sharing cards on Instagram one by one every couple of days as I've had a stack of cards to go through. And I also feel from an Instagram perspective, it's better to share one card at a time as it is a slower burn and you enjoy the cards better. But I'll tell you right now, I have these cards to share with you all on Instagram. But notwithstanding, there's a reason why I mention that. It is because of this very card. I now own, at this exact moment, 300 T206 cards. It's really hard for me to imagine when I started this journey back in 2019 at the National, buying Frank Chance, Solly Hoffman, Harry Hinchman, that I would now sit here in early 2025 with over 300 of these little cards. It's an amazing sort of personal achievement to hit 300, but I wanted to make card number 300 a special purchase. And this is also why I am collecting the way I am collecting in 2025. I'm going after the Grand Slam cards, and this is one of the cards in my top 5 targets for the year. But it also is a card that's very much in the vein of some recent content. So when you look back at my recent videos, back in September, I released an Elite 11 video. But I purposely left a player out of that video because there is some contention around, is it an Elite 11? When you look at like REA, they'll list it, I think, as like scarce 12. There's a 12th card in there that I did not talk about. And then in the video where I spoke about the very first printing of the T206, and I made a comment around there were only 11 actual cards that are only 150 printing. Now, this particular card is not one of those 11. This does, though, fit into the scarce 12 list. And so when you look at the strain of content here, they do connect in a way, and this is just another connection of those dots to further your knowledge around the T206 set. But for some of you, you have already figured out what card I have picked up. So without further ado, here is card number 300 in my set. Carl Lundgren with his Chicago variation. And shout out to Tim. Thank you for the deal on this card. This is a massive pickup for my set. But why is this card such a sought-after card? For reference here, just so you know, I paid $800 for this one grade with a missing corner. But I will tell you, the important parts of the card are all there. There is not a single crease over the face. The crease is at the bottom. There's nothing missing of the name, of the team. To me, it's an absolutely perfect one copy, and the back is even better, in my opinion, from the overall age of the card. But why is this Piedmont 350 nearly a $1,000 card? Number one, this Lundgren with the Cubs on the front, and I will also be doing a video here in the near future talking about the Cubs specific cards in the first printing because they're very unique compared to the second and third printing of the T206 set. But this Lundgren in his Chicago uniform is only found with 3 different backs. Most players have 4 to 5, 6, 7, 10, some have up to 25 if you go back to our Super Print 6 T206 card. But this particular card only has 3 different backs. Number 1, there is a Piedmont 150. Number 2, there is the Piedmont 350, and there's also an EPDG. Notably here, and where the contention comes in around this being an Elite 12 or the Scarce 12 is, there is no Hindu version of this card. There is no Sovereign 150. So this is why it can't be considered, in my opinion, an Elite 11, because it stands out by itself. It doesn't have the full library of backs to the card. Oh, and it also doesn't have a Sweet Cap 150 back either. So this Lundgren Chicago is very much on an island of all of the T206 cards. Now, yes, you have the island of Demet and O'Hara. That's that polar bear island that some people hate, some people love, but that's out there. This is another variation. That's that next step. This one only has, like I said, 3 different backs to it. But why is that? Why does Lundgren have so few backs? Because some of you who have been learning and looking at T206 cards may have realized and said, I've seen that card, but with a Kansas City uniform on. And you are correct. There is another later variation of Lundgren with a Kansas City uniform. But I'm going to blow your mind right now and tell you, he never once played for Kansas City. He refused to play for Kansas City. But I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget how this happened. So in 1909, he was playing for the Cubs. But my favorite player, Frank Chance, got tired of Lundgren. And so what did Frank Chance do? Frank Chance sold him to Brooklyn. Brooklyn then moved him to Toronto, where he went 1-3 during the 1909 season. But then on June 16th, he was suspended by Toronto. Some say because he was out of shape. Who knows what happened back in 1909. But then he was released. But then Kansas City bought the rights to Lundgren. And there is where he decided he didn't want to play for Kansas City. And he returned back to Chicago and played local ball throughout the 1909 season. But he does have that Kansas City card, which is a little bit harder to find. It's out there. It's nowhere near as expensive as this Chicago variation. But this particular Lundgren is really focused in on the very early parts of that 1909 season. Just like Simon Nichols is for Polar Bear. He retired 3 games into the 1910 season, and then he was never seen again, and that is why that particular card is so hard to come by in Polar Bear. But it's nowhere as expensive as this Lundgren for Piedmont 350. So just how rare are these particular Lundgren Chicago cards? Looking specifically here at EPDG, you have on a list from PSA and SGC combined. On PSA, there were just 23 graded copies, and with SGC, 24. In Piedmont, when you look at Piedmont 150, this is, though, the most common back of the 3, but I'll show you the pricing here in a second. It is still very expensive because this is the copy of the card most people go after because it is far more prevalent than the P350 or the EPDG. But when you look at Piedmont 150, you were looking on SGC 237 and then on PSA 148. You will also see on the PSA pop report, you're going to see that Piedmont altogether category. That's all the cards are graded before they started breaking them out into 150 and 350. That shows another 297. But when you look specifically at Piedmont 350 in PSA, you were looking at just 26 and SGC 20. Now, when you look at the particular pricing of these cards, first up here, we have the recent sales of the Piedmont 150 version. You'll see SGC 1 in February, $835. To me, that feels a little high. You look back at the end of last year, earlier this year in January, PSA 1, $570, 1.5, $500. Another PSA 1 in November, $579. I think that's a really solid price for the Piedmont 150s. Now moving over to the Piedmont 350s, you see that price jump. So in September, PSA 1, $1,100. Another PSA 1 in August, $1,800. Then, of course, you have the SGC 1 at $960, a PSA A grade, $540. And then moving over to the EPDG, you're going to see sales figures easily here, all over $1,000. PSA 2, 1.8, PSA 5, $5,000. Another PSA 1, 1.3. So this is why, number one, when you look up Lundgren Piedmont 150, why it's so expensive. All of the buying is centered around this card. But then if you want to have that next level card for your collection, you have to either do Piedmont 350 or you have to do EPDG. But this is the reason why I'm going after the home run cards this year in my set. I will never ever forget that this was my 300th T206 card in my set. I cannot wait to add 301, 302, and to see if I can add and collect all of the top 5 cards into my set this year that I have set as targets for 2025. So at this moment, I'm 1 down and I got 4 to go. So if you have a lead on any of the other 4 cards I want to add to my set in 2025, definitely let me know.